So here's a chilling little piece of information from the famous 1980 book Free to Choose, which was by Nobel Prize winning economist Milton Friedman and his wife Rose. Friedman was probably the most influential economist of the Ronald Reagan presidency. And he writes this. He says, in 1928, the Socialist Party put forward an extremist platform. And as Friedman points out, because they had no chance of winning, they didn't have to mince words about it. They could just state their principles bluntly. The platform involved nationalizing travel and some energy, interest-free state loans, shorter workdays, and all that stuff. At no time from 1928 on did the Socialist Party ever receive more than 6% of the popular vote for president. And more often, they were down around 1 or 2%. And yet, by the time the Friedman book was written, virtually every plank of their socialist platform had been enacted into law. How come? Well, the Friedmans say it was because the climate of opinion changed. That's what I usually call the narrative. Influential intellectuals in universities and in the media went from believing in liberty, self-reliance, and local voluntary institutions caring for their own, basically the American way, to thinking that government programs were needed to solve all our problems, regardless of the fact that government programs have disastrous effects on family, charitable giving, and individual freedom. Today, we're making fun of the Green New Deal as an idiotic plan to put a final end to the incredibly successful American way, and we keep pointing out that the polls are against it. But the narrative, the climate of opinion, is on the side of socialism and the end of freedom. And if we're not fighting that battle, we're not fighting at all. All right, so I'm going to read you a couple of paragraphs from the New York Times, a former newspaper, and see if you can spot the big lie embedded in this story. All right, just a couple of paragraphs, but just see how subtle this is, how subtly they lie, but how completely they lie. All right. Trump delivers blunt warning to Venezuela military over aid impasse. He's warning Venezuela that if they don't get their act together, maybe get rid of Maduro, they're going to have trouble getting American aid. Dateline, Miami. Okay. This is by Anatoly Kuramansi, Nicholas Casey, and Anna Carney. I guess they couldn't get a job at a real nice newspaper, so they had to settle for the Times. All right, here's the story. President Trump on Monday delivered his sharpest warning yet to Venezuela's military authorities in an increasingly tense showdown over that country's crisis, proclaiming they would lose everything by remaining loyal to President Nicolas Maduro and refusing to allow in emergency aid stockpiled on the border. Mr. Trump gave the warning in a speech denouncing Venezuela's brand of socialism to an enthusiastic crowd in Miami that included many Americans of Venezuelan descent who have fled Venezuela or have relatives in the country. Once Latin America's wealthiest, but now facing the greatest economic collapse in generations. Now, here's a clip with some selections of what Donald Trump said. See if you can spot the lie in the Times story.
Venezuela was the wealthiest nation by far in South America. But years of socialist rule have brought this once thriving nation to the brink of ruin. That's where it is today. The tyrannical socialist government nationalized private industries and took over private businesses. They engaged in massive wealth confiscation, shut down free markets, suppressed free speech, and set up a relentless propaganda machine, rigged elections, used the government to persecute their political opponents, and destroyed the impartial rule of law. In other words, the socialists have done in Venezuela all of the same things that socialists, communists, totalitarians have done everywhere that they've had a chance to rule. Socialism has so completely ravaged this great country that even the world's largest reserves of oil are no longer enough to keep the lights on. This will never happen to us.
Okay, did you catch it? Did you catch the big lie buried in the New York Times story? Here it is again. I'm going to read it to you again. It's just this one sentence. Mr. Trump gave the warning in a speech denouncing Venezuela's brand of socialism to an enthusiastic crowd in Miami that included many Americans of Venezuelan descent. Did you hear Donald Trump say anything about a brand of socialism, about a specific kind of socialism as opposed to some other kind of socialism? Didn't he specifically say that the socialists have done in Venezuela what socialists do wherever they rule. But the New York Times hates Donald Trump. They couldn't even report what he said because they are so committed. They are so committed to creating the climate of opinion, to creating the narrative that socialism, that there is a form of socialism that works, that's different. That they actually put the words into Donald Trump's mouth. They said that he denounced Venezuela's brand of socialism. He didn't. He denounced socialism in toto. And yet more and more people are signing on to this. Bernie Sanders announced that he was running for the presidency, and there was absolutely nothing. He held nothing back. He said exactly what he wants to do. Here's his part of his announcement.
Our campaign is not only about defeating Donald Trump, the most dangerous president in modern American history. It is not only about winning the Democratic nomination and the general election. Our campaign is about transforming our country and creating a government based on the principles of economic, social, racial, and environmental justice. Our campaign is about taking on the powerful special interests that dominate our economic and political life. I'm talking about Wall Street, the health insurance companies, the drug companies, the fossil fuel industry, the military-industrial complex, the private prison industry, and the large multinational corporations that exert such an enormous influence over our lives. Our campaign is about redoubling our efforts to end racism, sexism, homophobia, religious bigotry, and all forms of discrimination.
So there it is. It's the social justice. It's all going to be, and it's all going to be done through identity politics. You know that he's not ending any kind of bigotry at all. When he says religious bigotry, you know that it's not going to be religious bigotry against Christians. He only means religious bigotry against Islam or any other religion that is anti-Western. That's what he means. And you know that he doesn't mean actual fairness for black people or gay people. He only means fairness for black people or gay people who toe the socialist line. Identity politics is just a mask for socialism. But there it is. He's out there. And last time he did really well. Now, look, you can make the argument that last time he did really well. You can say, well, he did really well in spite of the fact that the Democrat Party was protecting Hillary Clinton. But you could also say that he wouldn't have done as if they hadn't been protecting Hillary Clinton. There would have been other candidates who would have taken his thunder away. I don't know. But young people were awfully enthusiastic. Fred Barnes, remember Fred Barnes? He founded the Weekly Standard, which just went out of business. He was a big George W. Bush supporter. He writes a piece in the Wall Street Journal, an interview with Mitch McConnell, Cocaine Mitch, in the Senate, which is really interesting. This is Barnes speaking. He says, we're entering a new political era. The issues are bigger, they're far outside the mainstream, and they're reminiscent of an earlier time, and the stakes are higher. One of the first to recognize this was Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. I can pretty safely say, says McConnell, this is the first time in my political career that I thought the essence of America was being debated. I never thought we would be debating things that were debated in the 30s, both communism and socialism. Those ideologies were largely discredited at a time when Americans would have found these arguments pretty appealing in the middle of the Great Depression. McConnell thinks socialism ought to be a tough sell today, given the prosperous economy and low unemployment. But, let me pause there for a minute, because that's not actually true. I mean, the fact is, the better things get, the more small problems seem like big problems. The more, we were talking about Jussie Smollett yesterday and his attitude of ingratitude. I mean, this is the thing. We all know that gratitude makes your life better. It makes you feel better. It makes you happier. And it's also, when things are going relatively well, it's also realistic. You're lucky to be alive. You're lucky to be free. You're lucky to be in a country where people aren't putting you in jail for expressing your opinion yet. And if you have that attitude, and like I said, Jussie Smollett is a lucky man. Jussie Smollett is born in a time when he can be who he is. He can be a gay black guy and be a success without it being any controversy at all. No one except the leftists is surprised that Jussie Smollett was a success. And yet he is trained, he is taught that he has to be upset, that he has to be, he's oppressed. And if he's not oppressed and people are not treating him like a victim, he has to go out and pretend to be oppressed. And that narrative is important to them. The narrative is important because it keeps them dependent. It keeps people dependent, blacks, gays, women, whoever buys into the victocrat, illusion, is dependent on government largesse. The government is going to protect you. It's going to protect you. You need your snowflake. You need your safe space. The government is going to protect you. All the authorities are going to protect you. You can't do it alone. You can't build a business. Everybody hates you. Everybody's out to get you. You walk outside just to get a sandwich in 30-degree weather. Two large guys are going to attack you and call you names. You know, that attitude is why people think, oh, we need a government takeover of all those businesses and everything's so bad, everything. And the stuff they're complaining about, in the old days, they were complaining about lynching, stuff that was bad. They were complaining about the fact that they couldn't get a job, that they couldn't be treated fairly. It's just not so anymore in an institutional way. Everything the government can do about racism, government has done, which is namely get the racism out of the government. Now it's up to you to be good enough and successful enough and creative enough and excellent enough where people just have to give you stuff for what you create. I mean, that's the way it works. That's the way every single minority in America has gotten ahead, not through government largesse, but by basically saying, hey, you know, I don't care if you hate me. You're going to want my product. You're going to want my services. There's every indication that that would happen with black people, because it does happen with the people who come here from places like Jamaica, where they don't have that ethos, that victocrat ethos. But they're so committed to this narrative. Listen to this. This is from, I think Grabian put this out. Cory Booker and Kamala Harris both reacted. I know this is a bit of a side issue, but still, it is part of this point of why socialism, why we've created an atmosphere where socialism, which has failed everywhere, could be sold to us in the midst of our success. Here is Kamala Harris and Cory Booker reacting to the Jussie Smollett news before and after the news was basically put in doubt.
Senator Cory Booker said the vicious attack on actor Jussie was an attempted modern-day lynching.
Kamala Harris calling the attack an attempted modern-day lynching.
Which tweet? What tweet?
About saying that it is a modern-day lynching, that...
Sorry.
Yes, Jussie Smollett.
Okay, so I will say this about that case. I think that the facts are still unfolding, and I'm very concerned about, obviously...
Well, the information's still coming out, and I'm going to withhold until all the information actually comes out from on-the-record sources. We know in America that bigoted and biased attacks are on the rise.
So before, it's a lynching, it's terrible, you know, and afterward, it's like, let's let the facts come out. Afterward, after things start to fall apart, then they start to get cautious about the facts. But even so, Cory Booker wants to sell the narrative. And, you know, he's right that hate crimes are on the rise. You know who they're on the rise against mostly? Jews. I mean, as always, it's the Jews, you know, and I mean, I think that, and who's pushing that narrative? The left. Who's pushing the anti-religious narrative? A lot of the hate crimes are against religious people for religious reasons. Who's pushing that narrative? I mean, it's the left. And so, I don't know. They can be thrilled by the rise in hate crimes, and a lot of these hate crimes, by the way, are minor stuff. I mean, it's bad. We always have to add that even one hate crime is too many, but the human nature being what it is, there's going to be that. Here's a poll. This is still from the Fred Barnes piece from 2016. Showed Democratic primary voters in every age group, every gender, and every race view socialism favorably. Among Democrats, 45 and under, 45% preferred socialism to 19% for capitalism. That changes a little, by the way. It goes down a little when you tell them what socialism and capitalism are. So, you know, people don't always know what they're talking about. But socialism, you know, again, it's a climate of opinion that this is okay. It is immoral. Socialism is immoral. It basically says that the government has the right to decide how to invest your money, where to spend your money. Government has certain narrowly prescribed roles that we pay for. Socialism basically says it can do anything it wants. And look, you know, I got to play this. Tucker Carlson put together this montage of Alexandria Occasional Cortex, the woman who is basically fronting this Green New Deal, which is just a blueprint for the end of American freedom. That's all it is. Tucker Carlson put this great this great montage together of the kinds of things that come out of her mouth while the press is selling us this idea that she is this lovely, intelligent, wonderful new leader in office. Here's the clip. Here's the montage.
I think that there's a lot of people more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than about being morally right.
But being factually correct is important.
It's absolutely important.
The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it? This is our World War II.
What this requires is massive government intervention.
It does. Yeah, I have no problem saying that. The right does try to mischaracterize what we're doing as though it's like some kind of massive government takeover. Obviously, what we're trying to do is, well, obviously it's not that.
You're talking about zero carbon emissions, no use of fossil fuels within 12 years?
That is the goal. It's ambitious. And
how is that possible? You're talking about everybody having to drive an electric car?
It's going to require a lot of rapid change that we don't even conceive as possible right now.
I mean, the woman is an ignoramus, and she's also dishonest, and she's also kind of vicious. I mean, all of the bad things I would say about Donald Trump, I would say about her, none of the good things. The woman wouldn't be anywhere without this massive, massive effort to make the kind of American death she's selling palatable, to change the climate of opinion. That's why I'm always talking about this, because I know it's not about the polls. I hear conservatives do this all the time, drives me crazy. Oh, this is unpopular. This is unpopular. The socialists were unpopular, but the climate of opinion made it feasible to push their agenda into law without there ever being popular enough to get elected to anything. You know, I'll end by just saying this, you know. Lara Logan, they say that a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged. I don't know if Lara Logan was ever liberal. She's a CBS reporter, but she's the woman who went to Egypt during the Green Revolution and was essentially, she was essentially raped. She was surrounded by a mob of men and they sexually abused her. And now she goes on this show, Mic Drop, with, what's his name? Mike Ritland, a former Navy SEAL, I believe. And she basically tells him what you hear on this show all the time, almost in the same words.
Maybe the best place to start is with the facts, right? You say the media is mostly liberal. Do I agree with that? Does everyone listening agree with that? What's our position on that? I agree with you. It's true. Why? Why can I say that with certainty? Well, first of all, because I've been part of this for all my life. I'm 47 now, and I've been a journalist since I was 17. And the media everywhere is mostly liberal, not just in the US. But in this country, 85% of journalists are registered Democrats. So that's just a fact, right? No one's registering Democrat when they're rarely a Republican. So the facts are on the side of what you just stated. Most journalists are left or liberal or Democrat or whatever word you want to give it. I always joke that the other 14% were too lazy to register. And there's maybe 1% that's on the right. Yeah. That's a joke, but really when you think about it, visually, anyone who's ever been to Israel and been to the Wailing Wall has seen that the women have this tiny little spot in front of the wall to pray, and the rest of the wall is for the men. Mm-hmm. To me, that's a great representation of the American media.
That's almost exactly the same joke I make. 85% and the rest of them are lying. But you know, this is the cloud of information, of the climate of opinion, the narrative that we're all surrounded by, and it is dangerous. And we are very bad, I think, at fighting back. And it's the reason I talk about not taking back the House, not taking back the Senate, not taking back this seat or that seat, but taking back the culture, because the polls do not matter a damn and the culture does.